In this video, we're going over the best magic items that help you stay alive by either making you harder to hit, allowing you to avoid taking damage altogether, or just do something that improves the survivability of your character by a lot, with a big focus on items that are usable by every class. And at number 10, we have the Ring of Spell Storing. Now, at first glance, this doesn't really seem like a defensive magic item, as what it does is allow you to store 5 levels worth of spells inside the ring at a time, and any creature who's attuned to the item is able to cast the spells from the ring as if they cast it themselves, although it uses the spell slot level, spell save DC, spell attack bonus, and spell casting ability of the original caster. However, none of that really matters for how we're going to be using the Ring of Spell Storing for this video, because what we care about are defensive magic items here. So the spells we're going to be putting into the Ring of Spell Storing are all reaction based. Specifically, low-level reaction spells that have pretty much long-lasting benefits all the way until tier 4 levels of play of nearly max-level characters. And those spells are Shield and Absorb Elements. Shield is a first-level spell, where as a reaction to getting hit by an attack or targeted by the magic missile spell, you gain a +5 bonus to your AC against the triggered attack, and you get to keep this +5 bonus to your AC until the start of your next turn, as well as taking no damage if you were targeted by magic missiles. The important part of Shield is that bonus to your AC, which lasts for basically an entire round. So, being able to cast Shield once is going to make you very hard to hit. In fact, a static +5 bonus to your AC is useful at literally every single tier of play, because that is a huge bonus to your AC for a turn. If you're playing a class that has a super high armor class already because of heavy armor, being able to add a +5 on top of that is going to make you unhittable, outside of critical strikes. So if you just load a Ring of Spell Storing with 5 uses of Shield, and then hand it to a melee frontline user, this could be one of the best defensive magic items you could give them. And there's also Absorb Elements, which is really good, where you can use a reaction when you would take 5 common types of damage, where you gain resistance to that one damage type until the start of your next turn. So kind of like Shield, you gain a really good benefit for basically a full round, where you just are taking half the damage from one common type of damage. And then you also get an extra benefit, where the first time you hit with a melee attack on your next turn, you deal an additional 1d6 damage to that target, based on the type of damage you became resistant to with Absorb Elements. So again, another great ring to fill a Ring of Spell Storing in order to give to a melee frontline fighter, because being able to gain resistance to fire damage, and then do a little bit of extra fire damage the next turn, is pretty good. Shield is probably more usable in more scenarios than Absorb Elements, but both of these are excellent first level reaction spells to give a Ring of Spell Storing, where if you're a DM and you're trying to hand out an item to make someone more survivable, all you have to do is load up a Ring of Spell Storing with 3 copies of Shield and 2 uses of Absorb Elements, and they'll be set for a while before they need to find a spellcaster to recharge it. Or you can have 1 use of the 3rd level spell counter spell, 1 use of Shield and 1 use of Absorb Elements to hit the hat trick of useful reaction spells to anyone. Although since this is not a traditional defensive item, I only have it at the bottom of this list, because basically this is just a way to copy spellcasters a little bit, and the item could be purely used for non-defensive purposes as well. And at number 9, we have the Cloak of Protection. I guess also the Ring of Protection, as both of these magic items do the exact same thing, where while you're attuned to this item, you gain a +1 bonus to your AC, and a +1 bonus to all of your saving throws. And just a reminder that the death saving throw is technically a saving throw, so this is one of the few ways to actually increase the chances of succeeding a death save. Now, I'm not sure why these 2 items are of different rarities when they both do the same thing, but whatever the case, they're both very simple items that just increase the defensive nature whichever character is attuned to them. Being able to increase your AC by a +1 without any other kinds of restrictions is pretty rare, so it's super valuable. The mechanical benefits of just gaining 1 extra, unconditional AC that's always on is so high that the Warforged race is considered one of the top 10 races to pick up because it has this one benefit as one of its racial bonuses. And being able to increase all of your saving throws by +1 is also pretty rare and powerful. The effects of both of these items are pretty generic and boring though, but they're also really strong on the number sides of things. Your characters will just be stronger if you have either of them, even if these items don't really have flashy, bombastic effects. And at number 8, we have the Serpent Scale Armor from Candlekeep Mysteries. This magical armor is counted as Scale Mail, which is a type of medium armor that sets your AC to 14, plus additional AC based on your dexterity modifier, but only to a maximum of 2. So what this means is if you have a 16 to your dexterity score, for example, which gives you a +3 modifier, then you'd only be able to add 2 extra AC to the Scale Mail, not the full 3 because it caps out, allowing the armor to grant a maximum of 16 AC if you have at least 14 dexterity. However, Scale Mail is also one of the armors that gives you disadvantage on your stealth checks, so it's kind of middle of the pack as far as armors go. Normally, scale mail is the best medium armor you can buy from a vendor without breaking the bank, as it only goes for 50 gold on average, whereas the next best medium armor, breastplate, starts at 400 gold on average, and the one above that is 750 gold. However, this is magical scale armor, and the two benefits that this scale armor has is that it basically just allows you to add your full dexterity modifier to your extra AC instead of only 2. And it removes the stealth disadvantage. So, not having stealth disadvantage is pretty nice, although you can gain the same benefits by just getting a breastplate instead. However, none of the other medium armors allow you to go past a +2 from the dexterity modifier. If you take the feat called Medium Armor Master, then you're allowed to go a +3 from your dexterity modifier instead of only 2. However, this magic item allows you to go the full +5 if you have a 20 to your dexterity score. Then, this Serpent scale armor will allow you to have an impressive 19 AC, which is +1 higher than even plate armor, which is the most AC you can get from base armor. So, Serpent scale armor is a must-have if you're playing a class that can use medium armor, if you just want to have the best AC from a piece of equipment, outside of just getting one of the generic +1 magic armors. Because a scale armor on a class that has 20 dexterity is better than a +3 magical scale mail, which is considered a legendary item. And Serpent scale armor is only uncommon quality. However, there are some other good armors. This list is only going to have a single spot on this list covering some of the special types of armors, so this is a good time to also mention some of the other ones, like the Elven chain. This is a special medium armor chain shirt which gives a +1 bonus to your AC while you wear it, and more importantly, considers you proficient in the armor even if you lack the medium armor proficiency. And of all of the baseline classes, 6 of them do not gain access to medium armor proficiencies unless they gain it through some other special feature or subclass. So Elven Chain is just a really good armor to give a class that normally doesn't get to wear anything outside of maybe light armor, as it can be better than any of those options. And finally, one of the best armors in the game is the Armor of Invulnerability, which is a legendary plate armor that passively makes you resistant to all non-magical damage, and allows you to make yourself immune to all non-magical damage for 10 minutes once per day. Obviously, the Armor of Invulnerability is a good defensive item. I won't give it a place on this list because I'm kind of putting all of the mentions of the really good magical armors at this spot, so that I can talk about a whole bunch of other things rather than listing all of the specific types of resistances and +3 armors as we go further on. And at number 7, we have the Animated Shield. This is a very rare shield which only has the effect where, as a bonus action, you can speak its command word in order to activate the shield, which gives you the benefits of having the shield equipped, but without having to use one of your hands to actually hold the shield, as it just kind of floats next to you and protects you like a normal shield would. Now, what's really useful about the animated shield is that it's always useful to have a shield on pretty much every class, since it just gives you a straight +2 bonus to your AC. But normally, you would need to use one of your hands in order to use it, which kind of causes all kinds of problems with spellcasters and melee fighters. A lot of the best weapons require both of your hands in order to use them, or to just dual wield, or even some of the spellcasting stuff requires both of your hands. Most classes want to hold a shield, they just don't have a free hand to do so, which is the main benefit of the animated shield. Always giving you the benefit of a shield without actually having to use one of your hands to do it. It does require a bonus action and only lasts for a minute, but you can use it as many times as you want per day to just have an extra +2 bonus to your AC. And getting even a +1 bonus to your AC is super valuable, so obviously an always on-demand +2 is even better. And at number 6, we have the Ghost Step Tattoo from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. This one is a little bit unique in its defensive nature, as what it does is give you a tattoo that you can use 3 times per day, where as a bonus action you can become incorporeal until the end of your next turn. And while you're under this effect, you gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks, and you can't be grappled and restrained, and probably the most important aspect of it, you can move through creatures and solid objects as if they were difficult terrain. However, if you end your turn inside a solid object, you'll take some damage and then be pushed back out into the next unoccupied space. So, what's really good about this tattoo are 2 things. First up, gaining resistances to those 3 types of damage is really good because of the most common types of damage you can take, and usually they'll come from non-magical attacks if you're fighting creatures from the monster manual. And you gain the benefits for basically 2 turns, as you have the full benefits for your first turn after you use it, and then until the end of your next turn, as well as those turns in between those 2 turns, where other monsters are taking their turns and trying to attack you. And while this would be a pretty good defensive item for that benefit alone, what really makes this tattoo kind of overpowered is that ability to go through solid objects. If you're in any kind of dungeon or house or just an inside static location, being able to go incorporeal can be equivalent to not taking any damage, because you can just go through a wall and end your turn on the other side of that wall, and then just come back for your turn because you keep the effect until the end of your next turn. So you can straight up have full cover during the effect of the Ghost Step Tattoo, and there's no better defensive item than not taking any damage at all. It also allows you to just completely skip all kinds of scenarios and puzzles outside of combat. Players should not have the ability to go incorporeal, and you'll find out real fast just how broken this is in a game once you gain access to it. Some of my players had the ability to go incorporeal during my Icewind Dale campaign, and skipped 3 chapters of the adventure because of it, especially being able to use it for 2 turns at a time and having 3 charges a day, where it only requires your bonus action to activate. It's an incredibly convenient tattoo and is probably undervalued at only very rare quality. Although how useful being able to go through walls is pretty dependent on where you're actually able to use the item. So technically, it's kind of situational. If all your battles take place in an open field with no cover, then it's not very useful, which is why it's not at the top of this list, but still definitely in the top 10 nonetheless. And at number 5, we have the Ring of Evasion. This ring has a special ability where if you fail a dexterity saving throw, you can use a reaction, spend 1 charge of the ring in order to succeed on that saving throw instead. The ring has 3 charges and regains 1d3 every day, so you can use the Ring of Potential 3 times before it runs out of charges for the day. Now, here's what's really good with the Ring of Evasion. Most saving throws are dexterity based. If you're fighting an ancient red dragon who's hitting the entire party with a fire breath, that's a dexterity saving throw. Where normally you would take enough damage to probably kill your character on a failure, you can instead use the Ring of Evasion to just immediately succeed, even though the DC is something like a 24. In fact, dexterity saving throws are probably the most used saving throw period, and so being able to automatically succeed them is akin to having pseudo-legendary resistances, a feature that only boss monsters have, where they can automatically succeed 3 saving throws a day. You don't get to automatically succeed any saving throw, but if you were to only choose one type of saving throw that you were able to automatically succeed on, dexterity is definitely the best one you could pick. And it's even better if you're on a class which has the evasion feature, where you take no damage on a successful dexterity saving throw. And at number 4, we have the Mantle of Spell Resistance. This is a cloak which simply has the effect that while you're attuned to the cloak, you have advantage on all saving throws against spells. There is also a similar shield called the Spellguard Shield, which is 1 rarity higher and also gives you advantage against saving throws against spells, but extends its benefits to include magical effects, and makes it so spell attacks have disadvantage against you as well. However, the Spellguard Shield requires you to actually hold the shield, so it's not as universally useful as just the Mantle of Spell Resistance, which is probably easier to get since it's only of rare quality instead of very rare. But basically both of these items are really good for the same reason. Being able to have advantage on all spell saves means you have a higher chance of succeeding spell saves. This is an ability that's so good that basically every boss monster has it by default in the monster manual, and some of the best races you can pick up are played because they have this ability by default, like the Yuan-Ti Pureblood or the Satyrs. However, they only work specifically on spells, so it's not as useful as magic resistance. But it's still a huge boost to your survivability to have advantage on saving throws against spells, because of just how strong spells are in D&D, where some spells can instantly disable your character, like a banishment for example. If you fail a saving throw against a banishment, then you're just out of the fight for a whole minute and there's nothing you can do about it. So being able to do the save at advantage can be the difference between completely losing the fight, or being able to stay around long enough to stop the spellcaster from trying to cast it again. And at number 3, we have the Winged Boots. This is only an uncommon quality item where you gain 4 hours of flight speed equal to your walking speed, that you're able to use in increments of 1 minute each, without requiring any actions on your part. So having Winged Boots basically allows your character to just fly at will. And what's really good about flying as a defensive magic item is the fact that a vast majority of creatures in the monster manual do not have ways to damage someone who's flying. Even something as scary as the CR-30 Tarrasque doesn't have a single ranged attack, or at least the 5e version. So if you have a level 1 ranger with a pair of winged boots and a magical longbow, they can solo Tarrasque by just flying out of range and pelting them with arrows until eventually some of them hit and whittle its health down to 0, since the 5e Tarrasque also doesn't have regeneration. The ability to fly in D&D is just super valuable, as it allows you to break a whole bunch of out-of-combat encounters too, kinda like the Ghost Step Tattoo. Although unlike the Ghost Step Tattoo, winged boots are also useful in an empty plane, without anything to hide behind. They're just more useful in more situations, well, except maybe indoors where there's nowhere to fly. The winged boots are so useful that they're one of the most sought after items in even tier 4 levels of play, where characters are level 17 and above and are basically demigods. Even nearly max level characters loved winged boots for just having the ability to fly, So being literally unhittable by a majority of the monster manual is definitely a good defensive item. And even the monsters who do have a way to hit a flying target with a ranged attack, usually those monsters do a lot less damage than whatever their melee attacks would allow them to do. And at number 2, we have the Cloak of Displacement. This is definitely one of the most sought after items that's only use is in its defense, where while you have the cloak, any creature that attacks you does so at disadvantage. However, if you take damage, the property of the cloak ceases to function until the start of your next turn, or if you're incapacitated, restrained, or otherwise unable to move. As what the cloak does is project an illusion that makes it appear as if you're standing near a location that you're actually standing, which is the flavor of why all the attacks are done at disadvantage against you. And just remember, attack is the D&D term for anything that requires a d20 attack roll, which includes all melee attacks and a lot of single target spells. If something requires a d20 attack roll in order to hit you, it's just done at disadvantage if you're wearing the Cloak of Displacement. And disadvantage on attack rolls is really good for not getting hit, especially since you can wear the Cloak of Displacement on top of other items. So if you just have a Cloak of Displacement on top of a maxed out Serpent scale armor, it's very possible for you to just never be hit during most combat encounters. So even though the cloak stops functioning for a turn if you do get hit, there's just a good chance you won't get hit, as the average math for what disadvantage really means when it comes to increasing your AC is that it's basically equivalent to gaining an extra +5 AC, just at all times, kind of like casting a permanent shield. However, an effect that stacks with shield. If you have the Ring of Spell Storing and you shield on an attack that might hit, adding the Cloak of Displacement on top of that is basically like having an extra +10 AC. It's not actually having a +5 AC, it's just kind of what having extra protection is similar to. And that's very good to have as a passive item that doesn't require you to fly out of range or go through walls. And at number 1, we have the Cloak of Invisibility. This is a legendary item that allows you to use an action in order to pull it over your head, which causes you to become invisible while you're wearing it. You can use the cloak in increments of 1 minute, similar to the winged boots, and you get a maximum duration of 2 hours per 12 hours that you don't use it. Although if you're only using it in combat, you basically never run out of uses of the cloak on an average adventuring day, and you'll be able to become fully invisible every combat. And what's really useful about the Cloak of Invisibility is that it's a type of invisibility which does not break upon attacking or casting a spell, like the 2nd level spell Invisibility does. And the benefits of being invisible in combat include, all attacks directed at you are done at disadvantage, just like the Cloak of Displacement. In addition, all attacks you do are done at advantage, and any spells or effects which require them to see a target don't work on you unless they have a way to see invisible targets. And you also have the ability to use your action to hide, since you permanently count it as heavily obscured. So the Cloak of Invisibility can give you all the benefits of the previous item on this list, while also giving you a whole bunch of combat offensive advantages as well, which doesn't turn off if you're actually hit by anything. In addition to the many uses you can get with the cloak outside of combat, where being able to go invisible is just incredibly useful in all kinds of situations. However, one benefit the Cloak of Displacement has over the Cloak of Invisibility is that you don't need to use an action in order to turn it on. So you do have to use your first action on your turn in order to go invisible, but the condition is so good that it's usually worth it. And the Cloak of Invisibility is one of the most sought after items in any level of play, including max level characters who have access to the spell Greater Invisibility, because it allows them to go invisible without having to use a spell slot or concentration. Alright, and that's the list. Are there any other better defensive items that I may have missed? Do you have ideas for future videos just like this one? I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.